Hello everyone and welcome back. If you're new here, my name's Lorna and I recently got back from a 2-week cruise around the Mediterranean on P&O's Arvia. I vlogged this trip, so do make sure you check out those previous videos along with reviews of the restaurants and tips and tricks for your time on Arvia. Now in today's video, I am going to be giving you a full and honest review of all things the ship, from embarkation right through to the cabin, entertainment, dining, right through to when you disembark. So make sure you grab yourself a cup of tea and let's get to it. Now, as I said, I'm going to be looking at all aspects of sailing on Arvia. So if there's a specific element that you're wanting an honest review to, do make sure that you use the chapters below to help you skip ahead to that part. Otherwise, just sit back and I hope you find this useful. Now, what better place to start than at the very beginning? So we will start with the embarkation process, which I'm going to be honest, I cannot fault. It was so quick and easy. It probably in total, from arrival of parking our car, we parked our car with P&O, from parking our car to actually boarding the ship, it probably took the grand total of 30 minutes. Absolute tops, maybe even less than that. And I think one of the things that really benefited the ship and the embarkation process, because there's a lot of people you need to get on board, was that they were really making sure that people were sticking to their boarding times. So if you did arrive early, that's fine. You're more than welcome to join the queue. However, you will be kept just outside of the terminal in a line, awaiting space for you to get on. And arguably, yes, you can get on slightly earlier, but you will have to queue and wait for that. We arrived pretty much bang on time. We arrived, I think, about 10-15 minutes before our boarding time slot. So we felt like golden VIPs. We were allowed to go straight through, straight up to the terminal. And as a result, we didn't have to queue at check-in. I mean, we'd already checked in online ahead of time. You're kind of very much encouraged to do that. We did find that our photos that we'd taken for P&O weren't up to the standard or the qualifications of what they needed, so they just retook our photos. That took all of 2 seconds, and then we just had to wait to go through security, which again was a measure I thought worked really well, because again it didn't mean that people were lining up for hours trying to get through to that security section. So instead you could sit, chill, relax, you could get a cup of tea if you wanted to, but we were sat down for about 5 minutes and then we got taken through to security, where we just went straight through and then you walked straight onto the ship. So embarking, cannot fault it. Disembarking in general was good. You were given a time in which you were told you had to go to a station, register with them, and then you were allowed to leave the ship. So we were given Sindhu, that was our location, and we had one of the later get-off times actually. So we had time for breakfast. We left our room at 8 AM. We ate breakfast at the quays. We then sat out a little bit in the atrium before heading to Sindhu. And this is where it just didn't really make sense, because there were lots of us. We went to Sindhu and there was nobody there were no P&O representatives to kind of check us out, which seemingly didn't matter, because we were like, okay, well then we just leave the ship because it's the time that we leave, and we were allowed off no problem. So it's not really a criticism, because the whole thing was still very easy, but I think maybe we were just unlucky that there was no one there to check us off, but it didn't matter either. And we had chosen to put our luggage outside our room, which meant that it was waiting for us off of the ship. And again, this was really easy to find. You just went to your zone. So we were deck 10 and we had a red label. So you just went to the area where you knew the deck 10 red labels were, and it was relatively easy to find our bags. I mean, again, given how many people are disembarking at once and how many bags are going to be in that kind of it's like a warehouse essentially, you'd think it might be difficult to find your cases. We did struggle to find one of the cases, but that was just because it'd been put kind of to the side slightly, but we weren't looking for more than 3 or 4 minutes. So again, it was very quick, and then you just joined the queue and got out nice and easy. But you might be somebody who chooses to keep your luggage with you. By all means, you know, do what works for you. But if you are considering leaving your luggage outside the night before, it's a very easy process to pick it up the next day. Now moving on to the cabin, if you do want a full cabin tour, do make sure you check out my first of my cruise vlogs, where you will get a full tour of the bathroom, the main kind of bedroom seating area, and the veranda, the balcony. But as a short review, I thought it was absolutely incredible. I could not get over the size of this room. The bathroom in particular was massive. Now I'm only 5'2", so things like a smaller shower don't really bother me, but Ryan, my fiance, he's 6'2", so the shower was a full-sized shower. Someone super tall could still fit in and not feel like they're Buddy the Elf where you're like paddling the water on yourself from the shower. And there was so much space as well, so you could easily have somebody getting ready in the mirror and using the shower, etc., and there'd still be plenty of room for you all. In terms of the kind of sleeping area, the wardrobes were inbuilt this time. Now, I say this time, my previous sailing was on Azura, which is one of the, it's not an old ship, but it's one of the, you know, it's not as new as Iona and Arvia. And Azura had like a walk-in wardrobe outside of the bathroom. Now, arguably this was to the detriment of the bathroom because the bathroom was therefore tiny, but it did mean that you had lots of hanging space for clothes. I would say my one criticism of this room was that the hanging space in the wardrobes was not very big and it wasn't very long either. So if you had a full-length dress, it was going to hang on the floor a little bit. Now for me, this was not a problem, but I'm just, as I said, I'm giving a full honest review here. In terms of other storage space though, there was so much of it. I cannot begin to tell you how many like little shelves there were. There were cupboards with little narrow shelves in. Around the mirror there were like 2 or 3 narrow shelves. In the bathroom there were even more. So plenty of places to stack things like deodorants, perfumes, makeup, things like that. So much space, more than you'd need. And above the mirror there was also even more space. Our cabin steward had put the cushions from our bed on top of there to kind of keep them out the way, so plenty of space. There weren't any drawers per se. There wasn't storage either side of the bed, which there was on Azura. But in the built-in wardrobe there were lots of cube spaces, so if you're someone who prefers like a drawer situation, I'd maybe encourage you to take packing cubes or like fold down baskets or something like that, so that you've still got kind of the aspect of a drawer. But if you're someone that's just happy with little stacked shelves, then this is ideal. The veranda was incredible. Now we stayed on deck 10. This was a longer balcony. It was probably about 7 feet deep is the best way to describe it. So there was so much space, and on it there were 2 kind of sun lounger chairs and a very small table. So this was ideal for us. We had so much space, you could hang out. There was only 2 of us, but if you'd had more people in your room, there would have been lots and lots of space for you to all sit out on that balcony, which was just blissful, wonderful. We were very fortunate that we were able to book a cabin with a balcony, and it did really benefit us on the cruise at busier times, on sea days in particular, and we could have our own space and still sit out in the sun and enjoy that. In terms of the managing of the cabin, our cabin steward did an amazing job. It was always it kept very, very clean. We had a couple of issues with the shower. It did break, but it was very quick to be resolved. Arguably the first day it didn't get resolved at all, and actually we then didn't have a shower that worked at all, but then maintenance got sent out to the room and it was fixed within half an hour. So fantastic. Cannot fault the ship for that at all. I would say, again, this was not a ship-wide thing, this was just our personal experience. I'm still to experience the whole having your towel folded up into an animal on formal night. It's never happened to me, but maybe one day. But again, this is absolutely not a reflection on Arvia. We had some friends also staying on deck 10 who could not fault their cabin either, and they couldn't fault their cabin steward, and they got left loads of like little towel animals and stuff like that. So if that's the kind of thing, because it is nice, isn't it? And if that's the kind of thing that you're looking for, it does happen on Arvia, so you can enjoy that. And then finally, the TV in the room was amazing. There was so much choice on the channels. I was also particularly impressed at how big the TV itself was. Really great clarity in the screen as well. And the other thing that you could do through your TV was you could also access the onboard app, which showed you how much you'd spent. It showed you kind of what you've been doing, what your reservations were, things like that. So that was really easy, made it really accessible, and you could just keep on top of what you were doing. Right, moving on to dining. Now I do have a completely separate separate video on this where I break down every dining location on the ship, so do make sure you check that video out. But as an overview, I would say there was so much choice on board. If you wanted kind of Italian, European, then you could go to the Olive Grove. If you wanted American diner, pancakes, things like that, you had 6th Street Diner. You have your classic main dining rooms as well, such as Meridian and Zenith, and then on top of that you've got some P&O classics, Sindhu, Glasshouse, Beach House, Epicurean. What more could you want? There really was a little bit of everything, with the added bonus of having Keel and Cow, which I just adored. So I felt that there really was something for everyone. And then I was about to say arguably less choice if you're someone who's maybe vegetarian or vegan, because a lot of these places that I've mentioned are quite heavy on the meat part of their menu offerings. I mean, obviously there are vegan and vegetarian options, but less so than if you eat fish and meat. But that said, actually, there's also Green & Co on ship, which was one of my favorite restaurants on the whole trip. So to have that, I just felt there was such variety on board. There really was something for everyone, so I can't fault the ship in that sense. What I would say though was that the service was sometimes a bit on the slow side when it came to dining. Now personally, this is not an issue. I like to take my time when I dine, but I know for some people, especially if you're going to your restaurant and you're hungry, this could maybe be a little bit frustrating. Now in places like Keel and Cow, they did pre-warn you that it would be at least a 50-minute wait for your dinner to come out. It was the only place they warned you that this would happen, and yet it was kind of universal across the ship that this is how long your food would take to come out. I think this is just mostly purely down to the ship was understaffed. It was not anyone's fault. You know, everyone was working so hard. They were working their socks off, and they were so courteous and kind and fun and lovely. But it was on the slow side through nobody's fault. With that in mind though, the one thing I just never quite understood, and this was more something that happened in the main dining rooms, like Olive Grove for example, but you were always asked what your food order was before what your drinks order was. Now typically when you go to a restaurant, you'd order your drinks and then they'd come out and then you'd order your food. But they wanted to know your food order, then your drinks order, and then we found typically if we were eating a 3-course meal, you would get your starter and then your main and then your drinks order would come out. So we just learned to just start taking our drinks in with us. When you're on a P&O ship, they don't mind where you take your drinks and glasses. They might sometimes give them to you in a plastic glass, so you know, if you're leaving the restaurant, which is totally fair enough. But we just found if we took our drinks in with us, it wasn't a problem, because then we still had something to enjoy while we were having our starter. So that, you know, you learn to work your way around that. I would pre-warn you that that there are 4 main dining rooms in total, but 2 of them, the Meridian and Zenith, would fill up very quickly on the app. As a result, we would quite often log in at about 7, half 7, and there would be 80 people in the queue already for those dining rooms. Interestingly, 6th Street Diner and Olive Grove didn't have that capacity. Like Olive Grove was usually about 6, 7, 8 people in line, and you typically wait about 5 to 10 minutes for a table to become free. Now we were dining as a 2, so that was inevitably going to be quicker for us. If you're dining as a much larger party, then it will be longer for one of those tables to become available to you. So I think one of the reasons that there were far more people waiting for Meridian and Zenith is because people just didn't realise that there were 4 main dining rooms and just went to these more well-known traditional MDRs. So if you are wanting to dine in one of those, just be aware that it does fill up very quickly in terms of the online queuing system. So do just get yourself booked in earlier with those restaurants. I do believe you can also go up and get a pager, a buzzer, if they're saying sold out. This happened to us with Keel and Cow. It said that it was sold out for the night. We went and we were given a buzzer and we were able to dine 45 minutes later. So I would give that as a little tip as well. Now moving on to entertainment, and this is kind of what Arvia has been said that it's going to be famous for, and do you know what, I can't fault it. There was so much variety, from fun Wallace and Gromit performances in the Sky Dome during the day to aerialists performing in the atrium at night time, and then of course you also had the Headliners Theatre. There really was something for everyone, and pretty much 24/7 there was always something going on. You could see musical acts in the clubhouse, you could go to the 710 for some live music. There was constantly something on, and quite often you'd be surprised with something like the aerialists in the atrium that you didn't even know was going to happen. Now, we experienced several headliner shows. I thought they were brilliant. I really did. They were fantastic singers and dancers, and they could act as well. We saw Greatest Days and we saw Digital, and we loved them both. We thought they were absolutely fantastic. And I would encourage you to maybe even try out shows that you don't think are going to be for you. We didn't think Digital was going to be for us, and I loved it. I actually think I maybe preferred it to Greatest Days. It was just fantastic. It was so clever in its staging, the choreography was fantastic, the singing was impressive. I loved it. Kind of staying on that theme of entertainment, I'm going to now move on to activities that are on board the ship. So we tried out the mini golf, which was great, and I'm shocked we did it on a sea day. Still no queue. There were plenty of people on it, but I think where it's not the most challenging of golf courses, it's not a golf course, crazy golf courses, and there's only 9 holes, it meant that people were off it quite quickly, which was great because then it meant there was never a queue. And I think it's also quite nice it wasn't an overly challenging golf course, because ultimately this is a family friendly ship, so if you ever fancy going up and you have young ones with you, it's something that they can easily get involved with and not get frustrated that they're unable to do it. So I really enjoyed it. It was really clean, the carpets were fresh, they were undamaged, the kind of scenery around it was fantastic. 10 out of 10. I love a crazy golf course, and this one did not disappoint. Right next to the crazy golf there is the high ropes. If you are somebody that is okay with heights and you've got relatively good physical fitness, do this. It is an absolute must. It's £7.50 I think per adult and £2.50 per children. Maybe it's £7 per adult. Anyway, I would say make sure you get yourself booked on. You do this through the app, the onboard app. Make sure you do this on day one. We made the error of doing it kind of halfway through the trip, and we're so fortunate that we managed to get a slot an hour later. That was just pure luck. Don't do what we did. But it was one of my favorite things that we did on board. It was fantastic, so much fun. You are kind of free to explore. There are several routes around it. You're free to go whichever direction you want. The crew who were on board teaching us how to do it were the friendliest, most supportive people on there. It was fantastic. And we got to do it on a sea day. So, you know, walking the plank in the middle of the Mediterranean Ocean is an experience I'm never going to forget. It was amazing. Continuing along this theme, there's obviously also loads of activities and fun things that you can do throughout the day. Now obviously I didn't do all of these, but we did take part in bingo, which was so much fun. We did this in the clubhouse. The people who led, the entertainment team who led this, were fantastic. And actually on that note, the entertainment team just were such good sports. They were so much fun. We went to one of the sail away parties. They were so just going with it, getting people involved, really fun, really lively people, so cannot fault the entertainment team there. Next up, we're going to look at excursions. Now we just did the one. We went to the biopark in Valencia and we loved it. It was fantastic. We thought it was great value for money. Bear in mind that it covered our entry to the zoo and also our kind of shuttle bus there and back, and within that we also got a tour of Valencia. So for us this was fantastic. We really enjoyed it. We were picky with our excursions. We were looking at quite a few, and what we personally did was we would price them up and look at how much it would be if we were to do it on our own. So one of the reasons we went with the biopark was because it was a very similar cost as to whether we did it ourselves or whether we did it with P&O, plus it would have been a lot less hassle to do it with P&O, and if there were any issues we would also, you know, not miss the ship as it left the dock. There were many other excursions that we decided not to do because when we did it ourselves individually, it was about half the price. So I would encourage you to do your research around that. But overall, the quality of the excursion we did was fantastic. My only criticism, and again, I think we were incredibly unlucky when we were disembarking in Valencia, there was an issue with the shuttle buses going into the old town when we were getting off the ship. So it was very busy, very crowded, and it was not clear which buses were shuttle buses and which ones were excursion buses. It was very difficult because of the length of the queue to get onto the shuttle buses. It was quite hard to skip this without people thinking that you were trying to skip the queue to get to your shuttle bus. So I feel that in that particular port in Valencia, this could have perhaps been organised slightly better. My other criticism with the excursion was we had booked onto an excursion that we believed was going to leave at 10 AM and we were going to get back at 2 PM. We were like, that's great, that gives us 4 hours to then go and explore Old Town Valencia ourselves. When we boarded and we got into our cabin on the first day, there was a letter in our door, and it was saying that because of various issues, no one's control, and it's no one's fault, you know, these things happen, our slot for the excursion had been moved back by 2 hours. Now this was unfortunate because it was then slap bang in the middle of the day. We did not have time to explore Valencia, which was a real shame, but you know, it just means that we can go back another time. And part of our excursion was still getting the full tour through the coach that we were on, so we still got to see Valencia, we just didn't get to be in Valencia. But you know, it happens, these things happen. Our friends who were on the ship at the same time, they were still on the 10 a.m. excursion, so theirs hadn't been affected. Yeah, so that was just a shame for us, but I don't think it's something that you should worry about necessarily when booking excursions. It's not something that's going to happen every time. I think we were just unlucky. Moving on to added extras. Now, if you saw the first of my Mediterranean vlogs, you'll see that we got a couple of little extras for our room, including the welcome package and the champagne breakfast, both of which I would thoroughly recommend you doing. Both of these packages can be booked prior to your arrival. You do this over the phone through one of the P&O representatives. The package included a bunch of flowers, a set of chocolates, and a bottle of champagne, and that came to the grand total of £70. I actually think this was really worth it. The flowers lasted for well over a week, even in the Mediterranean heat. The bottle of champagne was delicious, and if you'd bought it in a restaurant, it would have cost you about £25–30, and the chocolates were absolutely delicious. If you are somebody that doesn't like hazelnut chocolate though, don't go for it, because the majority of the chocolates are hazelnut. Good thing is though, they're one of my favourite chocolates. The champagne breakfast, again, cannot fault this. So you got a mini bottle of champagne, which would again have been worth £25 if you'd bought it in one of the restaurants. So you're essentially paying for the bottle of champagne. You then get this epic breakfast delivered directly to your room, including fruits, cold meats, muffins, pastries, orange juice, jam, tea, coffee, the works. And it's just so special having that delivered directly to your room. We booked this because it was our 1-year countdown to our wedding, so it was for a special event. But even if it wasn't a special occasion, as a little treat for once in your holiday and once in your trip, I would thoroughly recommend. In terms of the booking process for these added extras, it was so quick and easy. I called up, I think, 4 days before we were due to sail, and I got through straight away. The person who was helping me on the phone could not have been friendlier, could not have been more helpful, wanted to know all about me, my fiance, our trip, and was just wonderful. So the whole experience, 10 out of 10. Okay, finally moving on to the sun decks, which is probably unfortunately my most negative part of this review. It was incredibly busy. Now please do bear in mind that we sailed during the summer holidays, and I'm a teacher, we can't sail any other time of the year, and it was heaving. There's no short way of saying it, it was heaving until about 3–4 o'clock. So we just kind of shifted our day back by a couple of hours. We ate about 9 o'clock in the evening, so that then meant that between 3 and 5 we got to really enjoy the sunbeds and, you know, get two together. Now if you're somebody that is a solo traveler, or maybe you don't mind not necessarily sitting or lying next to the person that you're traveling with, then this isn't going to be a problem. There are so many single sunbeds on their own, and this is part of the problem. People would leave a gap between them and the party next to them, because you're on a cruise ship, you're going to be shoulder to shoulder when you're on those sunbeds. So it was busy, and the most frustrating thing was, I would say most of the time, about 1/3 to 50% of the sunbeds had nobody sitting on them, particularly early in the morning. And by early I mean 10 a.m. I'm a late riser, it was early for me. So it was frustrating walking around trying to find somewhere to go, and there was so much free space, but there just weren't any that you could go on. But every time we did manage to find a seat. Every time we managed to find a seat. I think the longest we were looking was about 15–20 minutes one day. And then we were just incredibly lucky someone got up and left just as we were walking by. Now, probably about 4 or 5 days into the cruise, an announcement got made on the TV screens saying that they would start monitoring how long your sunbeds were empty for. This happened for the grand total of a day, and it's a real shame that this was only monitored for a day, because I do think this would have really helped the problems that came about from the sunbeds. But you know, it only happened for a day, and that's that. You just get on with it. I'm someone that doesn't dwell on the things negative that happen on holiday, because otherwise you just won't enjoy yourself. So we just found other places that we enjoyed sitting. There was a collection of tables just outside the Sky Dome that we loved sitting at. It got sun and shade. We got to sit there. It was right by the bar, so there were people coming in and out offering us drinks. It was fantastic. So, you know, you just make of it what you will. The pools were incredibly busy. I will say the children on board were so well behaved. I honestly, they were more well behaved than a lot of the other guests on the ship, quite frankly. So if you went into a swimming pool, yes, you would get splashed in the face, but it wasn't because the kids were being naughty, they were just being children. So, you know, you were going to have children jumping in, splashing around all over you. So it wasn't the most calming place to be if you're going to a swimming pool. You kind of went in to cool off and got out. There is the beachcomber pool, which is adults only, but this was most probably, I'd say, the busiest pool out of all. So you would go in and you would be stood shoulder to shoulder with people either side of you. So again, not the most enjoyable experience. So we would go in, cool off, get out, and then that would be that. But you know, that's all we needed it to be, so it was fine. The whirlpools, there are several around the ship, and unfortunately these were not manned. So a lot of the rules about how old people had to be in the whirlpools were not adhered to. So quite often you'd be trying to find a whirlpool you wanted to go in, and it was largely just young children in those whirlpools. Again, not misbehaving. If this is something that doesn't faze you, then not a problem. For us personally, we were on a trip, just the two of us. We waited until a day when it was a bit quieter. It was actually our day in Alicante, and we got on the ship early and made the use of these amenities while there weren't many people on board. But overall, we found you just work out where on the ship you like, you work out where works for you, you know the quieter areas, you know the busier areas, and you work out where's going to be right for you. And I'm obviously giving you my feedback based on someone who is you know, early 30s, my fiance's late 20s, and we were there on a couple's holiday. If you're there going as a family, then your experience is going to be completely different to mine. And I would say for families, this is an amazing ship. You've got places like the Sky Dome, which, you know, it has a cover for when it gets too windy or the weather's not so great. You've got a big pool in there, you've got a couple of whirlpools, you've got the ice cream bar, you've got the pizza place. It's all there at your fingertips. It's a great place to be able to give your children a bit more freedom but still enjoy yourselves. So there is my review. Do let me know if you've been on Arvia what your views are and what are your favourite parts, what are your least favourite parts. I love hearing from you all. This is the last in my cruise vlog series, so thank you so much for watching. But that said, there is still lots more exciting content coming out for you in the very, very near future if you are a fan of all things travel. So do make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out. And as ever, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, see you later.